Commemorating the wars and conflicts of our nation's past and honoring all those who have served in them is a VFW priority. We help to rally local level support of national endeavors because we know that by working together, America's heroes will never be forgotten. It's just another way we're able to give back to those who have sacrificed so much for our way of life. As a World War I commemoration supporter, the VFW helps spotlight events, publications, productions, activities, and programs that allow people in the United States to learn about the history of the Great War, the United States' involvement in the war and the war's effects on the remainder of the 20th century, all while commemorating and honoring the participation of the United States and its citizens in the war effort. Our next speaker is not only Quartermaster General for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, but in 2016, she was also sworn in as the newest commissioner to the United States World War I Centennial Commission, tasked with providing public outreach, education, programs, and commemorative events. Please join me in welcoming Quartermaster General and World War I Centennial Commission member, Debra Anderson.
Good morning. As Commander Harmon said, in addition to being your Quartermaster General, I am a commissioner on the World War I Centennial Commission. And because this is the 100th anniversary, I really wanted a few minutes this morning to give you an update on some of the things going on with the commission. I should have a remote. Okay, we'll just talk through the slides. The commission was formed in 2013 by act of Congress. There are 12 members, 12 commissioners on the Centennial Commission. 3 were appointed by the President of the United States, and 6 were appointed by senior members of Congress. The other 3 are appointed by their organizations. There is always a commissioner representing the Veterans of Foreign Wars. There's a commissioner representing the American Legion, and there's a commissioner for the World War I National Memorial and Museum, and that happens to be Dr. Matthew Naylor, who you heard speak at the memorial ceremony on Sunday. So there's only 12 of us, but we've got staff and a lot of advisors in order to make sure that America adequately, appropriately recognizes the centennial of the war and takes the appropriate actions to educate Americans. We actually have 3 missions: to educate Americans about the service and accomplishments of U.S. forces in World War I, to commemorate those events of a century ago that truly continue to shape us today, and to honor the 4.7 million Americans who served during that war and the 116,000 who gave the ultimate sacrifice. At last year's VFW convention, the delegates approved a resolution to support the mission of the World War I Centennial Commission. And this truly gives us another way to do, as our charter says, perpetuate the memory and history of our dead. 4.7 million served, 2 million deployed, and 116,000 did not come home. There are no more living veterans of World War I, so it's up to us to ensure that they are not forgotten. The VFW has supported every major memorial in Washington, D.C., including the Vietnam Wall, the Korean War Memorial, the World War II Memorial, and they're all located, as I said, on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A major, major conflict that has not been commemorated in D.C. is World War I. And we've got the beautiful memorial here in Kansas City. I encourage you to visit that, but there really needs to be a memorial in Washington, D.C. Now, Congress has said no more memorials on the National Mall, and the Desert Storm Memorial was really fortunate to get into that space that they got. But we recognized several years ago that we weren't going to get on the mall, and we had to find an appropriate location to put that memorial. And in Washington, D.C., just 2 blocks north of the mall is a park called Pershing Park. And on this map, I know it's really hard to read there, so I will just tell you, to the left or west of the red space is the White House. So it's just a block off the White House. South of that is the Washington Monument, the tall monument in Washington, D.C. Bottom of the photo is the National Mall, and the Capitol buildings are just off the page to the bottom right. So it's very close to the Capitol, the White House, and the other memorials. The red space is Pershing Park. It's not on the mall, but symbolically, it's right there in a high-traffic area on Pennsylvania Avenue and close to those other monuments. This is what the park looks like today. The central feature is a pool that could also be used as an ice skating rink back when it was first designed, but it hasn't had water in it for 10 years. To the east side is a statue of General Pershing and 2 walls commemorating the American Expeditionary Forces of World War I. As you can see in the photos, the park is truly in disrepair. And if you walk it today, you'll just see that the water's not flowing, things are falling apart, the statue is still there, but it's really a mess. It looks terrible. So you would think that we would be able to revitalize this park and make it beautiful and it'd be a done deal. But as Scott Stump spoke about the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., we have also been dealing with that. But we're very fortunate and appreciative that last week the Commission of Fine Arts did approve the design that I'm getting ready to show you. So we've passed that major hurdle that what we plan to do is everybody's in agreement and we can very soon get started on this memorial. The next picture should show the design for the new memorial. There it goes. The shallow pool will be rebuilt. The landscaping will be all redone to make it a beautiful, peaceful retreat, a nice park in a busy city where it's quiet and people can enjoy nature and enjoy the water. The focal point will be this sculpture wall to the far end or the west end of the pool of water. So in this photo, you're standing at the Pershing statue looking across the water to this wall. And this wall is going to be 56 feet long, so just imagine how big that's going to be. And then from the other direction, here you're looking from the wall back toward Pershing. And then the next slide is some details from the wall. It started out as bas relief, and if you know what that is, it's a flat surface that then has some dimension to it with figures. But our sculptor was able to, through some new technology, find a way to have his figures pop from the wall so it's like a half or a three-quarter sculpture, but it's still all connected in the background on the wall. The sculptor is Sabin Howard. The figures will be slightly larger than life, and the wall itself will tell a story. The next picture has got the entire wall, but the photos don't do it justice. You'll see a model of this or a maquette at booth number 541, and that will give you an idea of what it actually looks like. But I want you to hear this story because it does tell a story of a soldier during the war. But it isn't just that soldier. It really represents all veterans. I think it's something that many people in this room will relate to as you hear the progression in terms of what's happening to that soldier. So I want you to hear that story. We're going to play a 5-6 minute video clip with Sabin Howard, the sculptor, talking about the wall and what it took to design that and what the meaning is behind it. So if we'll play the video, please.
I've been given the task of collaborating with the World War I Centennial Commission. I'm currently designing and sculpting a 9-foot-long maquette that I will present to the Commission of Fine Arts in Washington come February 15th of this coming year. It's called The Soldier's Journey, and it's a transformational story that represents this moment in history that changed the world forever. To tell this story to the general public, I had to come up with a theme that would be understood by all. And so the whole idea of like showing what World War I looked like, what we looked like as human beings is really critical here. So I went into the studio and I got models. I took 12,000 pictures in the studio to make 9 iterations and finally come up with the soldier's journey. It's a hero's journey. After I'd read Joseph Campbell's books, I realized that this occurs in every single culture and every single period of history as well. A template that explains our voyage through life. This initial scene is about the connection between daughter and father. I wanted to create a sense of nobility here, so I put the father on his knee, so he's almost asking his daughter, I'm sorry that I have to go, but I have to proceed, and I'm doing this for us and our country. So the next scene is about the wife. She is moving in two directions. Her feet are moving towards the family, and her head is moving towards her husband, who moves forward and departs, and joins his fellow soldiers, and you call it the Brotherhood of Arms. This is a symphony that I've created, in that the outside parts are slower, and then the kinetic energy starts to get a little bit faster as we move towards the center. The battle scene begins at the very edge of the trench. All these figures are kinetically moving as fast as I possibly could move them. This is about animal angst. This is about what happens on the battlefield. This scene is led by this man, is a gunnery sergeant named Dan Daly, who at the Battle of Belleau Woods yelled to his men, "Come on, you son of a bitches, do you want to live forever?" The pose that I've picked here is about courage, the strength to go forward into places that you've never traveled before. They're about stepping into the void. The battle scene is driving down into the ground. And you have this diagonal that goes down, and this is part of the X. X is a symbol for transformation and change. And it follows these mathematical ratios of the golden sector. This is very structural, it's very classical. The soldier falls directly in the center of the composition. So he balances things out. And from here you have the cost of war. The camaraderie and the brotherhood of arms that is created on the battlefield, and the caring that happens between soldiers. The helmets represent the fallen, the unknown soldiers of this war. The next scene explains mustard gas and its effects on the soldiers with the blindness, and the nurse shows the caring quality that the nurses had to have to help the soldiers through such a horrible experience. This diagonal rises and brings you back to our protagonist. A moment of what the hell happened to us. We would call it PTSD today. It was called the shell-shocked look, and it's about the 1,000-yard stare. He is the only figure in the composition that does not move forward towards the future. He looks directly out at you, and the reason I did that is because I wanted the visitor, as they walked along the wall, to arrive at this point and have a sense of connection. Because they would look into the eyes of this soldier and sense the emotional gravitas. So now the hero returns, and that's what this section is, and I've incorporated a nurse with a wounded soldier, representative of the female heroes of this war. The figures become stronger and more energetic with more power as they move towards the future. And then that diagonal continues up to the flag, and the flag is the highest point in the composition. This flag bearer and grouping represent the way that our country changed, how it became an industrial superpower from an agrarian nation. And that's what this transformational figure of the father represents as well. And the next and final scene, which is again returning to a much quieter moment, is the father handing his daughter his helmet. She holds his helmet in her hands. She divines the future, and she represents the next generation, which is World War II. And that is the story that I've created here to give a visceral reaction to something that was incredibly tragic and transformed the globe and our society. So each of the characters plays an integral part in this narration. Removing or shortening any of them would destroy the composition visually and eliminate the balance that has been so carefully worked through.
So imagine this 56-foot sculpture wall at the end of a pool, and it symbolizes courage and sacrifice and transformation and brotherhood and family. So it's all there in the story, but and really no matter what service you were in and what conflict you were in, it speaks to me, and I hope that it speaks to you. In addition to supporting the memorial, the commission has those other functions I talked about. I won't go into any detail, but there's an educational component so that teachers can have access to materials to teach from. There's a poppy program so that if posts want to sell these poppy seeds, the proceeds that they earn after buying the package stays in the post, but what they pay for the package then goes to build the memorial. In partnership with the Pritzker's Military Museum and Library, the commission funded 100 Cities, 100 Memorials. We're trying to bring attention to memorials across the country. We want to identify all those memorials through the Memorial Hunter program, and there were 100 selected for this honor to be selected as a commission for recognition. There's also a silver dollar coin through the U.S. Mint with profits going to the memorial, and a stamp is coming out next week with a World War I theme. So lots of different things going on that individuals and posts can get involved in. I do want to talk a moment about Bells of Peace. If we'll advance the slides. There we go. Bells of Peace is really the next big opportunity. The 11th day of the 11th hour, 2018, is when the war ended, and so 1918, 2018, we want to commemorate that. So on that day, at that time, we are asking cities and churches across the country to toll their bells 21 times. And you can get involved by talking to your local churches, getting proclamations from mayors and governors, and doing what you can to support the tolling of the bells. So all across the country at 11 o'clock, people are recognizing the sacrifices of World War I. That day, there'll be a ceremony in Washington, D.C. I expect there'll be ceremonies all across the country, and so be aware and support those as well. So that is a really quick summary, but it's an important commission. This is the year that everything is happening. I wanted to bring you up to date on what is going on with that. I'm really honored to be a member of that commission, and I thank you all for your support. Thank you.